People often ask, why does God let bad things happen? It's a common question, and at one point or another, everyone wrestles with it. As a media production major, my final semester of college has a class set aside for me to create a project entirely my own. As I brainstormed what project to choose, I kept coming back to a similar question. What role do people with disabilities have? What's their place, and how can we do a better job stewarding and appreciating that place? I've always had a deep desire to tell stories, and I'm moved when people choose to share their stories and be vulnerable with others. And I think there's a great deal of growth and change that comes out of that vulnerability. Over the course of the past year, I've had the opportunity to connect with two families who walk in and wrestle with these questions every day.
We were in for the 20-week ultrasound, and they did the scan, and the ultrasound tech sort of hesitated and stepped out of the room and said she had to discuss with the radiologist whether the scan was complete. And it was pretty clear that something was off. Doctor came back in, I think, and said they were going to redo part of the scan. Unfortunately, Samuel was actually in preschool at the time, and I was already running late to get him. So I had to scoot out of the appointment while Becky stayed there.
So I got the news by myself.
That was the Inskos, parents of 10-year-old Samuel, 8-year-old Olivia, and 6-year-old Madeline. Madeline is an energetic, smart kindergartner who loves playing with her siblings. She also has spina bifida.
They sort of give you the wide range of all the things that can happen, but she was only 20 weeks old at the time, so there was a lot to be determined about what things would look like for her. I think what left us with the biggest impact was after they kind of described all the things that could potentially go wrong and what she would have to, endure. They told us that we had a couple weeks to decide if we wanted to terminate. And when they offered that, I think that's when panic set in, that this was I think before that I thought, well, we'll deal with it. We'll figure it out. It is what it is. When they say that, it sort of makes you think, am I misunderstanding something? Is this really worse than I'm perceiving? Because to offer that as an option seems like only a dire circumstance would warrant that. And I think that's when I really, started to lose it a little bit.
This comment struck me. How often is a medical professional recommending and encouraging the termination of a child's life because of their cognitive or physical diagnosis? Who's telling the story of how good, purposeful, and rich their lives will still be?
Well, we first found out, I believe, maybe like halfway through the pregnancy, the doctor saw certain features that they thought that might be a Down syndrome possibility, such as, I believe it was
the back of his neck was measuring thicker.
Yeah, and maybe the length of some of his limbs and things like that. So they kind of gave us like a small percentage maybe of a chance that he might be born with Down syndrome. And then when we were in the hospital, Angie had a very early birth. I believe it was 31 weeks. And Caden was only 3 pounds when he was born. And the doctor saw certain physical features again that led them to want to test for Down syndrome, even when he was first born. And then I think the test came back like a week or maybe 2 weeks later or so that he was Down syndrome. So that was when how we found out.
This is Lon and Angie Klinklenberg, parents of Caden and Carly. Caden is a boy who loves his family, music, dancing, singing, and bouncing his basketball. Caden also has Down syndrome.
I really didn't know what to expect when we found out the diagnosis with Down syndrome. But I view it as Caden was born the way that God created him. And I really wouldn't want it any differently.
I would say from when we first found out the diagnosis, obviously we were scared, worried, because we wanted a healthy child, and with Down syndrome, you can have a lot of medical issues. And thankfully, Caden is very healthy. But I know when he was first born, we brought him home. I remember Googling everything, which is not the way to do it, or just even books about kids with Down syndrome. And I remember just sitting in the chair bawling because every medical issue that could have happened to Caden, and it didn't.
We had very frequent scans all the way till she was 37 weeks. And they went to do a specific kind of test where they just sort of see whether she's prepared for delivery. So whether she's starting to practice breathing and whether she's got motion in all of her extremities. And one of the tests that I had, routinely at that point, the scores were low, so they decided to put me through this other test. And so they watched Madeline very closely for about an hour, and she hadn't done all the things that she needed to do. They were a little concerned, so they said, well, we're going to send you to the hospital, and they're going to do this test again. And if she doesn't pass that test, then we probably need to deliver her. We went through that test, and she could do most of the things, but she was failing on any of the lower extremity motion. So we were told by the neurosurgeon that what they're really looking for is motion from the hips down. So if she has motion at that level, she should be able to walk, but she might need, braces or things like that. If they saw motion at the knee, then we feel good that she's going to be able to walk on her own, but she would just need, some sort of structure braces or something to help her, maybe crutches. Ankle motion would be, like icing on the cake. Yes. And so we were watching very intently, and we never saw any motion really. The hips, they thought they saw motion, but they couldn't tell if it was just from the way she was sitting in my belly or if that was actually her moving. And we saw nothing from knees below. When we left that scan, we were prepared that Madeline was not going to be able to walk on her own at that point. After talking to our doctor, she said, well, let's give this one more day. That night, I started to feel potential contractions. Ironically, I went into labor, so we ended up delivering her that next day via C-section. So we really wanted our doctor to be there, so I held out till she was available until they could get our neurosurgeon in line. We actually have a camera shining down on the little table where they put the baby, so you can actually see your baby. And so that was really nice. I got to see her right away. I mean, they held her up to me, they showed us her back, and we took a picture. And then they went to go lay her down on the little rolly cot there, and she kicked the nurse. So we saw her moving her feet right away. And after that, I just thought, I don't even care what happens. That was amazing. We didn't expect that at all. We didn't know what all we were gonna encounter in that very moment that she was being born. And we had to leave it to God. We had zero control. So, but like I said, she came out, she was kicking. The nurses all, in fact, one of them, her kiddos went to preschool with our kids. And so we knew she was a Christian, and she was just saying, that is a delivery we will never forget, because we all felt the same. We knew this baby was going to come into the world, and we had no idea what we were going to see, what they were going to have to tell us, what procedures were going to have to be done. And she wasn't perfect, but she could move her legs, and that was something that we knew we couldn't get back. So the fact she could do it at birth was just amazing to us.
We knew she wasn't going to be able to move her legs, and she comes out and she wiggles her toes and kicks a nurse. And she said there was crying in the operating room, and it's going to be one of those things that they take with them for life. And she knew right then that this was something important.
The Inskos knew that after Madeline was born and stable, she would undergo 2 major surgeries. The first would be to tuck her spinal cord into her back, and the second would drain fluid from her brain.
It was about 3 a.m, and we waited and waited. It was a 6-hour surgery, I think, as I recall. And it turned out they felt like they did not need to drain her brain. that fluid. They thought she was, stable at that point, and so they thought if they could wait a little bit, that would help her outcome. So these shunts that they put in have like a 50% failure rate in the first 2 years of life, and then they have to be continually replaced. They oftentimes fail because kids with spina bifida's bowels and bladders don't work, and so they get constipated, and that's where the end of the shunt tube lands. So these kiddos, once they put a shunt in, they're basically signed up for hundreds of brain surgeries in their life. So if we even just pushed one off a little bit, we felt like that was a win. But usually what happens is they close up the back. And when they close up that back, then that whole pressure system increases. And so then that's oftentimes when they have to do the surgery. So we got really lucky. That first surgery was only for her back, and he felt like it was very successful. And clearly, I mean, she runs and plays today. She jumps. So he did a great job. We just were kind of waiting for that next surgery. We lived that way for months, but by the time we hit 3 months, they said, she couldn't ride in a car. She couldn't ride in a car seat because her head was getting so big that she'd have to have her head so far forward to accommodate the head that her neck was in pain, and it was uncomfortable. So we lived in Coralville, and we just tried to get to like the North Liberty exit, and she would scream bloody murder. So Iowa's feeling was at this point we probably needed to do the shunt. So she made it 3 months without, and we should be thankful for that, but now she's due to start that. And so I think we were accepting of that, but we just wanted to make sure we had done right by her and look at all the options. So we really wanted to go to Mayo to get a second opinion on that. And the thing is, we couldn't even get her in a car, let alone drive her 3.5 hours. So we were a little stuck. And a coworker of mine, a friend, her dad has a private airplane, and he offered to fly us to Mayo so that we could have Madeline get a second opinion. So we did that, and their thought was we could wait a little bit longer, and if they did need to intervene, they would do something else.
6 years later, and Madeline has never needed a shunt.
At kindergarten, I think half the kids are oblivious and half are just very inquisitive, and you're just trying to navigate that. And I think Madeline is very intelligent, and I think she is very aware of when things are
Not quite so.
Yeah, when someone has drawn out that there is a difference, she's already aware of it, and just she perceives it all. We've had some challenges this year with just sort of, now we're at that point. When she was littler, she was already in diapers. All the kids that age are in diapers. There was no difference aside from just some of the testing and the underlying fear. But I'd say probably in the last couple of years really started noticing, she was in dance with other people, and you could tell she noticed she couldn't jump the same way, and had some feelings about that. People had said stuff about her wearing pull-ups or having to go to the bathroom at different times, and she was kind of the rubber met the road at that point. We had to start, I guess, finally dealing with that point where she was no longer feeling like she was everyone else. She was different than the other kids. And we've had some difficult times where, she's come home from school very upset and, why I wish I didn't have this. I wish I could be normal like you guys. And if that doesn't break your heart, like, I don't know what does, It's like I would take that from you in a second if I could. Oh, I can't. So just do our best. We talk a lot about how everybody has a thing. Everybody has something that is hard. Some people's are medical, some, aren't. Some are visible, some are not. And at least we knew what we were going to deal with when Madeline, was diagnosed. There wasn't a surprise. I can see why our heart is much better than other hearts, So I think we've just kind of conveyed that to her that, your life is hard in this way, but that everyone's dealing with something. So just I don't want her to feel like she's the only one who's dealing with something. So.
Sometimes I kind of feel maybe, even, somebody born with Down syndrome, you're kind of looking at, like, a typical person would say, well, he has, a disability. But sometimes I kind of look at it as like, maybe like everyone has like a disability or disabilities, but this one's a little bit more pronounced in like, maybe you could actually like tell like right away. But really, everyone has maybe some disabilities or abilities that they can't do, such as maybe someone has a problem with their foot, or some anxiety, or just other behavior reasons, or a learning disability, or dyslexia, or things like that. So sometimes people don't talk about like all those disabilities, but I guess with Caden with Down syndrome, it's a little bit more pronounced, and it's just kind of that's what you see. But I really think maybe he's just like anybody else, and like I said, everyone has maybe a disability of some kind if you can really think about it.
If you really boil down the Bible right from the start, from start to finish, a big chunk of what God is asking us to do is to trust. It's right from minute one, just trust me. And we inevitably fail repeatedly, but I think it's the progress toward more trust and more trust. And so that's been a journey, and I have, I've been forever changed through the things that we've gone through, and it's not just this situation, but it's certainly sort of the key to getting into that position and saying, okay, I do trust. I'm going to challenge and try to take control sometimes, but I get it, and I need to let go, and so I think that's really the big thing, and that's where trust and faith go hand in hand. That's been my journey through this.
I can't imagine going through life with or without Caden without faith in God in my life. So obviously having our faith and our strong faith and helps tremendously because we give it all to Him. Because we're not going to lie, there are challenging times, there's scary times. I mean, he's healthy, but he's been through many procedures, surgeries, being put under, and that's all scary. Is he going to have friends? He wants friends. Is he going to have friends? Is he going to go to birthday parties? All that kind of stuff. So, but without having my faith, I can't imagine not having that. So,
And I would just say I believe that God created Caden just like He created anyone else, for a purpose, and we're all a family, and we see things that how Caden is and how we are, and it's just God put us on this earth for a reason, and I really think that Caden's touched a lot of people's lives and made them see things a little bit differently sometimes.
absolutely.
What maybe what is important to someone else, maybe to like a family like ours with Caden is not as important, and we kind of see things differently. I always say if I have a bad day at work and I come home and Caden's there, he's having a good time, or we're just doing something, he kind of makes you realize maybe what's important and what's not. Again, I think that God created him just like anybody else and put him on this earth for a reason, to maybe to show people some different ways of looking at things and really touching them.
He is a child of God, so I mean, he's right there is his purpose. Every life has a value, so that's what his purpose is. His purpose is like any one of us. He wants to have a family, he wants to have friends, he wants to live his life for Jesus, so it's kind of the same as anyone. So every life has value, but then obviously the people that have disabilities, I do feel like their purpose is to spread awareness of the disability, and they're more like than different and all that kind of jazz. Like tomorrow we're having an awareness walk for Down syndrome, so obviously that's a big purpose because he's spreading a lot of awareness. But I also feel like just bringing joy to people's life, because he really does. He's pure joy. He really is. And everybody that meets him just says the same thing. And like you said before, he's changed so many lives.
Yeah. And you'd be surprised sometimes maybe we're out in public and Caden just does something funny, or he maybe even throws something at somebody or says hi or something different, and it's just a different maybe reaction that you get from people or something. And next thing you know, we're talking to people, or like we meet somebody that we wouldn't have met before, and it's just a little different like that. He can just kind of just change someone's day. I think he just kind of really gives people a good feeling sometimes when you would least expect it.
And then the other thing that I want to say, like what he's done for me and our family, I feel like he slowed us down, because it does take him longer to do things and everything. So just in life in general, you just really, instead of running everywhere and doing everything, it just brought everything. You just slow down in life. You see the joy in the little things. I mean, you really do. And you don't take things for granted, because he does have to work very hard on almost everything. And you just take those little things for granted that we just do so easy. And he's a hard worker. And that's the other thing with him. He doesn't give up. It's hard for him, but he might be stubborn about it and not want to do it, but he keeps doing it.
I clearly remember the moment of surrender. I felt, I'd grown a lot of faith in years. I'd grown up in the church, but different life things happen and you get stronger. And I had never truly surrendered and said, whatever this is going to be, it's yours, and I will take whatever you have to throw at me. I will absorb it, and I will be that vessel. And if that means she can't walk, if that means multiple head surgeries, if it means, I just said it's yours. And if that's what I have to do with this life, and that's what you have for me, I will do it. And I will accept every little bit of it. I clearly remember that day. And then you have that day when she's born and she wiggles her toes, and all the things that they told us were going to be wrong weren't. I was prepared for. I truly feel I was prepared to accept whatever was going to be, and then you have this sort of swing of the pendulum to the other side. Okay, I don't know what this is, but I know it's a miracle.
I think that initial instinct to fix, or you find out something's wrong, you're like, okay, how are we gonna, what's the logistics? How are we gonna navigate this? And then you hit this panic moment of, I can't fix this. There is absolutely nothing that I can do to make this any different. You have to trust. Like, those are the moments where, you have nothing else. And I feel guilty by saying that it took that to make me feel like I just had to trust 100%. But I think I've always trusted God, but I didn't have to do it in such a visceral way. I could just logically tell you, yeah, you know what, it'll work. Like, God's got it. This was a very different type of trust. This was just a very vulnerable, I absolutely can do nothing here. Like, this is just what it's going to be.
My final question in these interviews was this: what would you tell a parent who just received the diagnosis? These two mothers put into words something that seemed almost effortless to them, and to me, it was so profound.
I would probably say, first I would say congratulations. And then I would say it's okay to grieve. It's okay to mourn, because it's like you lost a typical child. You weren't expecting to have a child with a disability. So it's okay to do that. And then you probably will feel guilty because you don't want to feel like you're sad that you had your child. But so that's all okay, all normal. And then just love that child like you would love any other child. And that you will find out sooner or later that it is the best journey that you'll be on. And you'll be part of the lucky few.
The day that we got the diagnosis, she wasn't in the room because it was just with the ultrasound people. She said, I know they said that they offered termination, and and I told them, like, she's not going to be interested in that. Like, don't spend your time with that, but tell us, what does this really mean? What are the statistics we need to be thinking about? She was an advocate for me in that respect because I was still, I think, a little dumbfounded. Every major milestone that Madeline's had, I would text her videos, and she has always said, like, I need to, I'm going to show this to the residents. I'm going to show it to the high-risk team. Like, they prepare you for the worst. And I think to a certain degree, they need to make sure that parents are not caught off guard and whatever. But they also need to know that there's hope. And I really felt like in that time between that diagnosis and when she was born, we didn't get that from our providers. Because they're preparing you for the worst, and they're wanting to make sure that logistically you have the things that you need to bring this child into the world and to take care of it. And I think I see these videos and I share them, and if she's continuing to share those on, it's like, it's a way of saying that, it can be okay. Can't promise anything, but like, it can be okay. And don't just assume the worst. They need to know that, again, I know there's a whole political whirlwind about this, but to get that diagnosis is not a death sentence. I want people to understand that her diagnosis might limit some areas of her body, but it's not her brain, it's not her heart. She just has little problems, the ambulation and using the restroom. Like it's really very minimal when you think about what makes a person.
So what's the story? The story is one of hope. These children deserve to live their lives because their lives are full of purpose. Their lives bring light and joy to the world, and they change the lives of those around them. Their disabilities do not limit their personhood. It really is simple. It's a diagnosis, not a death sentence.